my goodness! Holy sh!
All right, so for the engine, like this is some big grand unveiling, I have this piece of greasy crap. This is a 302 from out of I'm gonna guess 85, 86, 302, 85, 86 F150. I bought this truck a long time ago, like probably 17 years ago, for some now forgotten reason, wanting the engine. I only got to hear it run for a couple of seconds because the fuel pump was bad in it. All the windows were busted out. It was a rust-bout old two-wheel drive beater truck, and I took a chance on it for, I don't even remember how much I paid for it, maybe 150 bucks. And whatever plans I did have for it never happened, and the truck just sat around here for the longest time. Maybe about 5 years ago, I was in a cleaning kind of mood, so I went ahead and pulled the engine and transmission out of the truck, sent it to the scrap, and this sat in the shed for a couple of years. And then, I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago, I pulled it out of the shed and started tearing it down a little bit. I was going to use it in a project. I think I was going to use it in this Bronco too, if I'm not mistaken. But then plans changed, and it ended up shoved back into storage. But here it is again. I've pulled all the main bearing caps and checked them out. The bearings don't look terrible. I do have a new oil pump I'm going to put on it. For the front dress, I'm going to use Explorer 5-liter stuff because it's the nice short stuff, just like I run on my Mustang. I got this used 3-sprocket timing set. Even though it's used, it really, I don't know what kind of miles it's got on it. It's not very much, so it's not a sloppy mess. And got the old Duraspark distributor for it. Another thing of note about this engine, it was an early fuel injected engine, and it had a weird sticker on the intake about some Ford factory experimental stuff. I'll see if I got a picture of that sticker around. The fuel injection system itself looked like any other. It just must have been a factory prototype of some sort. I don't know, maybe not prototype might be the wrong word, but maybe an early production of their fuel injected setups. It had all V-belt stuff on it though, where most of your fuel injected engines that I've seen had the serpentine belt. But I'm yammering on too much. I'm going to go work on this, scrape some of the nastiness off it, try to get the timing chain, front cover, oil pump, and then get the early Bronco oil pan on it. So the first thing I'm going to try to do is get a new rear main seal on the back of this. Thankfully, this block is new enough that it takes the one-piece seal, which I greatly prefer over the two-piece. My plan is I'm going to try to lift the crankshaft up a little bit, slip the seal on, and then just pop it back down in place. Easy. That seemed yeah, it feels like it's actually got some pretty decent compression. I don't know, it appears the camera's picking it up, but I don't know what brand this timing chain set is. Like I said, it came off an engine that didn't have a terrible amount of hours on it, but instead of actually bringing it up to 0, I'm going to go ahead and advance it 4 degrees more to enhance low-end torque. Seeing how it is going in a Bronco, it's probably going to be hopefully swinging 33-inch tires. And yeah, maybe with the stock 350 gears, or I could swap in some 410s into it eventually. But for now, let's go for the low end torque. Seems like a good solid plan. So on this timing cover, this bolt hole here and this bolt hole here were all buggered up, so I had to drill and tap them out the next size larger, which was 3/8. Yeah, I know, you're not supposed to do it that way, but it's done. I don't know what year exactly Ford started doing this. They put the dipstick hole in the block itself. But this Bronco oil pan I'll be using has the dipstick in the pan. So what I've done before in the past, just take some RTV, stick her in there, give her a good squeeze, and then swipe it off. Make a plug for that RTV. Just like so. Not elegant, but it does the job. New milling oil pump, USA. Don't forget your drive shaft. Little dab of sealant in the corners. So what I'm up to right now is I remembered I have a couple bags of these out in the part shed. These are the seals for the valve stems. And while so far the ones I've checked out on this, none of them are falling apart, they are kind of hard. They're not nice and flexible like that, so I'm going to go ahead and change them. First thing we'll do is pull all the rocker arms off on the one side. Alright, I got them all off. It's not showing on the camera, but I took all the other ones off too. So I got all the rocker arms off, pulled all the push rods out of the way. And the special tool you need is this little air fitting. It threads into your spark plug hole and allows you to pressurize each cylinder one at a time. That keeps your valves from falling down into the cylinder because the air pressure is, holding everything open. I already got the one spark plug out. I always leave all the other spark plugs in. I just do one at a time because I figure it probably wouldn't hurt anything, because when you put the pressure to it, it could actually make the piston move down. But it's only going to go down so far. But with the other spark plugs in, it might minimize the chance of it doing that. But like I said, even if it does do it, it ain't going to hurt nothing. Sometimes it helps to have a magnet handy to grab the little keepers out of there with, and then a little hook tool, but those two came out pretty decent. And there you go. Ooh, that's on there. Yeah, it is. Just needs a little twisting action. Yeah, they're not falling apart, but they're kind of hard. Get in there. Hey, look at that, there's a tip. Gotcha. Didn't get my keeper, but I got the tip. I'm struggling here. There we go. Only 15 more to do. Got all the valve seals done, and I scraped the intake gasket off. I spared you the boredom of watching that, because boy, it was a real son of a bitch, especially this side for some reason. Driver's side wasn't too bad, but if you notice, I didn't put the rocker arms back on, and I figured that was a good idea. Excuse me. Because scraping this intake gasket off, I'll stuff rags down each intake runner, but still, there's a chance you're going to get something in there. But with all the valves shut, or at least the intakes anyway, once you're done, you got it all cleaned up. I've got this small shop vac hose here. I can run it right down there into each intake port and do one last final clean in case anything did fall in there. But yeah, I think I got her all cleaned up, ready for the intake manifold. I'll put the rock arms back on, and then I was, for valve covers, going to use these old vintage ones. I think these came off the engine that was originally in my '69 Mustang. I kind of like the Power by Ford script on it, but I was going to have to sandblast them and paint them up. And then at the swap meet a couple days ago, I came across these for 20 bucks. So yeah. The vintage ones I think would be kind of cool, but these will save me a lot of work. And yes, I do notice that both of them, the flames are, on one of them, the flames are going to be going backwards. But yeah, it's not like going to be pulling up to a car show and throwing the hood open on this thing. As you can see, I have 4 guide pins here. Those are just some bolts that I cut the heads off, threaded them in a couple threads. Keep the gaskets in place and everything lined up while I drop the intake down in there. Yeah, it's only a Performer 289. I don't need a Performer RPM. This thing is just going to be a low RPM putzing around on the street thing for now, in theory. Things get a little more serious about it, then we'll look at, yeah, if we want to get more serious, I'll probably put a 351 Windsor in it. Okay, so check these valve covers out. I had to make my own baffle plate in there, and there's obviously 6 places to put screws in it, but when I did that, hold on a second, when I did that, and I just had a hunch, yeah, I had the plate all the way across, all 6 screws touching it, holding it in. I'm sorry, I'm tired. And I put the valve cover on, and then I rotated the engine over. Obviously that was without a gasket in place. And yeah, as I rotated the engine over, it picked it up a little bit. So I went in. There's, if you hold there, and let's see if I can do this with one hand. If you hold it there and line it up, yeah, it was probably some. Let me try this again. All right, there we go. That's a little better. Now then, this would be lined up in here where there's nothing. So I'm guessing something around in here was touching, so yeah, I just kind of had to trimmed it down. There's only 2 screws, and then I bent it up. It's not as good, but it'll have to do. But yeah, here's another thing. You look at that, it's like, oh, they didn't drill the hole there. Well, they didn't even machine it for a hole there. It doesn't concern me a lot, being as it's a cast iron valve, or not cast iron, damn, I'm tired. Cast aluminum valve cover, and it's on the top, so I'm going to go ahead and run it anyway, but I can't put them on tonight because I don't have bolts that are long enough, so I think I'm going to call it a night. I'm really tired. This wasn't the only thing I was working on. I got tired of scraping intake gaskets, and I'd stop and go do other things, but I'm tired, calling it a night. I'll get some bolts tomorrow. Gotta feed these precious little nippers. So I've got this disassembled 302 Duraspark distributor here. If I'm reading the tag right, it's a 82 model, E2. I wanted to recurve it. I had this thing, it was already took apart. I found it down in the shed. I forget why I had it apart, for some project that I bailed on probably. But anyway, those of you that don't know, these Duraspark distributors, the amount of timing is determined by this slot in this, I'm just going to call it an armature, and there's a number on each slot. If I can, that says 15 I believe, and this side is 21, and you double that number and that gives you the amount of advance. I want to put a 10 in it for 20 degrees of advance. Neither one of these are that. The 10s are a little kind of hard to come by. But I dug around in my distributor stash and I found this distributor. I don't know what it's off of, 351 Windsor or a 351M, 400, 429, 460, whatever. But if you look in these little windows here, hold them in just the right light, you can see that number that's in there on that armature. And it looks to me like there's one in there that says 10, so I'm going to try to salvage that armature out of here. Let's see how it goes. I don't know, people bitch about how these are a pain in the ass to work on, and I won't say they're wrong, but they're not that bad. But yeah, just to get in there and change your timing, it's a pain in the ass compared to other distributors. I'm thinking my biggest problem is going to be that the armature shaft here is rusty, and it's not going to let this trigger wheel slide off very easy, but let's find out. Alright, first of all, let's give it a little spritz here. Mostly just because of the rust on that armature. Let me get this little piece of felt out of there. I'm not sure if that's felt or dirt or what, but that is a crumbling bastard. Looks like there's some bug in there too. Yeah, that ain't good. Okay, so got it blown out. I don't know if it's going to be able to see. I don't think the light in here is good enough. There's a little clip inside there. Usually that is the hardest part I have, is getting hold of that clip and getting it out of there. There. It came out easier than usual. Give this another spritz. Typically, I can usually pry that little trigger wheel off of there with a couple of screwdrivers, but that may not be the case with the amount of rust on it. Look at that, it's going. Of course, yeah, this is a lot easier, or a lot harder when it's on an engine because you don't have this much room in the engine compartment. Now there's a pin, where is it? Okay, the pin's stuck right there in the armature, that's okay. I may be wrong on this, but if you look at that, there's a spot for a roll pin exactly 180 degrees apart from each other. And it's always looked to me like they're perfectly in line with these armatures, so I'm assuming it doesn't matter which way you put it back in with the roll pin. It should come out the same either way, but like I said, maybe I'm wrong on that. And the pin stuck right into there. Let's see if I can get it off of there. Yeah, There we go. Tiny little pin. Now there's another little snap ring down in here somewhere. I can't quite see it because of all this crud. Yeah, I just need to use my fingers a little more. Little wire clip there. Magnetic pickup come out of there. There's a screw on this side. Little booger. And now there's like, I don't know what you'd call that. I guess I'd call it a pivot plate because that's what the magnetic pickup pivots on when the vacuum advance is working it. Okay, as you can barely see as I spin this, these springs here, that's what controls the how quick the advance comes in. 1 and 2. Now typically, this is what I've always seen in these Ford distributors. There's 2 different separate springs in there. So yeah, a different weight spring and whatnot will get you a different advance of rate, or different, good Lord, I can't talk today. A different rate of advance. I've got some aftermarket ones that are supposed to bring your advance in a lot quicker. I'll be putting back in this. And, whoop, voila, there she is. There's a 10. Let me turn it over for you. Okay, just as a comparison here, there's the 10. This is a 15. I was mistaken about these ones. That's actually a 16 and not a 15. And that's a 21. So that is a huge difference right there. Now you're probably thinking that I'm just going to take this 10, slap it in there and be done with it. No, no, no. Because these 10s are a little harder to find, I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to weld this up and make it into a 10. And just keep this 10 handy to do that with later on for a measurement. I'd already done this in the past and I don't know why I couldn't find the 10 I had already, and so that's why I had to go dig around and find another one. As you can see, I have the armature, like I said, for lack of a better word, clamped to a piece of brass there. I'm going to weld that gap shut and then just use a grinder to bring it back up to 10. So there we go, my brand new 10-degree armature. Something else that I found, this is the 302 distributor. Right there on that little arm that fits into the slot, it had this tiny little plastic bushing. So that was probably to take up a little bit more, so it wasn't running quite as much advance as whatever the original armature was. This one didn't have it that the 10 came out of. Now what will I do with this 10? Hopefully I won't lose it again like I did my last one. I'm going to try to put it up somewhere where, yeah, I'm sure I'll lose it again. But as a side note, let's see here. These 2 springs came out of the distributor I just took apart to get the 10. These 2 springs came out of the 302 distributor. These 2 springs are going to be what I will put in the distributor. It's going to bring the advance in a lot faster. There's other ways you can tweak this. Let's see if I can do this. Right, let's see, here's where the springs go, between this pin and that pin. You can also adjust the tensions on the springs by bending the arm on this pin on both sides a little bit. So you can get, do a little bit of fine tuning, although it's not very scientific. And yeah, I'll admit it's a pain in the ass to dig all the way down deep into these distributors to get to it. But yeah, it's not bad. One more piece of the puzzle in. This old nasty engine's actually starting to look like something. What do you think, Ralphie? I'm ready to slam that engine into place. Yesterday I got a couple of cans of engine degreaser, some wire brushes, and cleaned up this transmission a little bit. Didn't turn out as good as I'd hoped, but it's a lot better. Hopefully, if that's where all that oil leak was coming from, was the transmission, maybe having a little bit cleaner will help me find the leak later on. But I'm crossing my fingers hoping it was the missing engine that caused all that mess. Well, I damn near put the wrong flex plate on. Good thing I checked the numbers on it. But here's a little story that will tell you the hazards of putting the wrong flex plate on an engine. Well, it doesn't matter. Here's a little story. I checked the numbers, not on this one, I took it back. But in my search to find the right flex plate, I walked down to my part shed down there. I knew I had a 302 engine from an Explorer, but I was pretty sure it didn't have a flex plate on it. But I'll go check it anyway before I go clear up into the parts bus. And just as I was coming around the corner to walk into the doorway, a buck, as in a male deer, came running out of the doorway of the shed. Apparently he was in there trying to get out of the summer heat. And yeah, boy, he about took me out in two ways. The first way is, stampeding over me, and the second way is a heart attack, because that was the last thing I would expect to come out of that building. Anyway, I went up to the bus, found a proper flex plate. I believe this is actually the flex plate that came off of this engine, if the markings are correct. So a lot of people cuss the way Ford did this with their torque converters, and I can't say that I disagree. It's kind of a messed up setup to try to get those pins lined up while you're trying to line up your bell housing bolts. Maybe I've just gotten good at it over the years, but the technique I use is I make sure the drain plug that's right next to the stud, that part of the torque converter is straight down or lining up with the access port, whatever that may be. On this one it's straight down, and I match the flex plate as well. And then once I get the engine in place, or not in place but down there getting close, I take a tiny little screwdriver. I can feel in that hole and see where the drain plug is at and see which way it needs to go, and just get the screwdriver in there and give it a little pry one way or the other. So I usually start out with a bolt that's way too long, and if I can get at least that one started, it gives you an anchor point to go from there, instead of having the whole works wobbling around. Usually once I have the first long bolt started, most of the time when I've got the alignment stud down here and the torque converter even close, you can just kind of wiggle it around and it all just falls into place. But like I said, maybe I've just gotten good enough at doing this over the years. I feel that it does need to be pried over a little bit. A little more. It's all lined up. Now that I got a couple of the shorter bolts in, I can take the long bolt out and replace it with the proper bolt. Now, just as a precaution, when I'm tightening down the bell housing bolts, I don't just crank them down. I'll pull them down a little bit, and then I'll reach in here, and I can't quite pick it up. Right there, the stud, the torque converter. Every so often, I'll reach down there and grab that stud and make sure the torque converter is free. Otherwise, if it's not clunking like that when you move it back and forth, something's bound up in there. Maybe, I've never had this happen, but I'm always on the lookout for it. Like maybe I don't have the torque converter in the bell housing far enough, but that always tells me that everything's good so far. Excellent. All right. So if I remember right, I believe it said that the driver's side header, you have to pick the engine up a little bit or something to get it in there. So I might as well put it on there before I drop the engine down in its mouth. So I got a big problem here with this header. The driver's side, it is actually touching the drive shaft currently. And another issue, I'm going to have to relocate this fuel line. Otherwise that header is just going to be cooking that line right there. Not a big deal. I should just be able to run it right on top of the frame here. Maybe just kind of zip tie it to the proportioning valve. Another thing, the vent line down in there. I'm doing a bad job of showing this. It's right up against the header, so I'll have to reroute that as well. But those are only minor problems considering that the header is actually touching the drive shaft. I need to deal with that first. What it really needs is to come up and away. And it doesn't just need to come up, it needs to be kind of rotated the way I'm seeing it. These ought to work great for a 351 Windsor because the 351 Windsor, the block is taller, which actually makes the cylinder head come out and up more, which is exactly what that needs. But yeah, not real happy with the Tom's off-road headers. I'm going to give them a big old thumbs down. If I were putting a 351 Windsor in there, they'd probably be great. But they're not working for a 302 as advertised. Well, it's the next day. I've given it some thought. Yeah, I mentioned before that I've bought these stainless steel, probably Chinese-made headers before, and I've actually, both sets that I've bought, I've actually done a little bit of cutting and modifying on. Both of them in the collector area, and I don't know what grade of stainless steel that is, but it seemed to weld just fine with my MIG welder and just regular old wire. So I think what I'm gonna do is the collector here that came with it that's supposed to go over the ball, I'm gonna strategically try to cut the collector off right about here and try to put enough angle on it to get that away from there. And additionally, I'd like to see a little more clearance between the drive shaft slip yoke here and the header, but yeah, the further away you get from the axle, any suspension movement is minimized the further towards you get to the transfer case. So maybe that'll be okay. I wasn't even ruling out the option. I pretty much decided if I was going to try to heat these up and bend them, I probably would have jammed some sort of a board in here, and it might still come to this if I find the drive shaft is hitting the tubes down there. Yeah, jam a board in here and apply outward pressure here and then heat them up right in here. Now the other side, I don't really have to do anything to it, but I figure if I'm going to do one, I'm going to go ahead and do both so they both have this. But I'm not real crazy about how close this collector is to my transmission cooler lines. I've seen worse, but I figure, yeah, if I'm going to be cutting up one header, I just will do both. So I'm going to do the same thing to this side. That'll provide a lot more, I don't know about a lot, but a little more room for the cooler lines. Then I might even put a heat shield in there as well. I'm going to tip this collector, when I cut it, try to tip this down and away. But right now, as you might recall, I told you yesterday about that story of me going out of the parts shed and about getting run over by a deer coming out of there. And that reminded me the day before that, I mowed the yard, which, you know, this is a milestone too, I believe, because I mowed the yard 4 times now, and I haven't had to work on a lawnmower. It's amazing. Is this how people normally live? But anyway, getting back to the story, the day before the deer almost ran me over coming out of the shop, or the shed, I just got started mowing, and I saw what I'm going to assume is the same deer right down there in the area of that shed running away. And the angle he was running, the speed he was running, when I saw him, it made me think, did he just run out of that shed? But I didn't give it much thought after that until he almost come running out there and run me over yesterday. But anyway, what I'm getting at here, I need to go down to the shed and get I need the dipstick tube for the oil pan. I've got another oil pan down there. I'll need to rob the dipstick tube out of that. What else? A starter motor. Let's sneak up and see if that deer is in there today. I'm gonna sneak around the long way, see if we can't look in there and see if he's in there. I think the only reason I can see why he would be going in there, because it's a metal building and there's very little airflow in there, so I don't know why it'd be cooler to go in there, because it's been pretty hot out, but maybe the concrete floor in there is cool and he's laying on that. So we're gonna go around here, see if we can peek in there. I'll be damned, I didn't figure he'd be in there. I'll turn him back now. So, this didn't weld nearly as nicely as the other stainless steel headers I've done, so it must be a different grade of stainless. But I got it done. Seemed like what I had to do is use small tack welds to go all the way around it, and then once I had some, the tack welds kind of put a little more substantial material in there, then I could actually go ahead and run beads and run them out wider. It's, yeah, not some of my proudest welding, but we'll see in time if it holds. Yeah, it looks pretty ugly. I guess I should have went and looked, maybe had somebody TIG it, but it doesn't matter now. Well, the passenger side header, it welded a lot better. It's mostly just because with the driver's side header, I was doing a butt weld with a little bit of a gap in it at places. Or this one had a lot more overlap because I wasn't like trying to get every little bit of angle I could out of it. Let's put it all together, see how she looks. All right, that's plenty of room for one of these type of clamps. Like I said, I don't know how well it'll work. I've never used them before. If it fails, I guess it's always a possibility I could pull the whole header back out and weld another extension to this to give it more room for a normal type of clamp. I actually could have got more angle out of that, but I was afraid that on the very real possibility that I ever want to put a 351 in this, as I mentioned before, the block, well, the heads would be taller and sit out further, which actually means this header would be coming up and out. And I didn't want to get that pointing too much towards the frame or actually get into it. I did mention about rerouting the fuel line, and I was worried about the flexible brake line came up through here originally. I was going to put a heat shield in it, but I got to studying it and I was like, it's going to be just the same amount of work to just reroute that line. And it's a lot cleaner look without a heat shield in there, holding debris in and whatnot. Here's basically what I did. I just moved the flexible line to the front of the engine mount, and I was even able to reuse the steel line that goes to the proportioning block. And let's take a look at the passenger side. No real issues here, plenty of clearance. I'd say the closest it's going to be, it's right there to the fill tube, not a big deal. I do want to put a heat shield in here, but I'm going to wait till I have the body on to see. Yeah, there's not a lot of attachment options there, so it might have to end up getting attached to the body somehow. Well, I wouldn't say that I'm close to trying to fire this for the first time, but I'm getting a little closer. I'm getting close enough that, yeah, I pulled the distributor back out and I'm going to prime the oil system because this engine's been sitting for so long and I had the main bearing caps off and all that. Past few hours here I've been messing around with wiring. I've got the newer permanent magnet gear reduction starter down in there that you can't see, so you got to wire that up a little differently. I've been getting rid of the old charging system wiring, getting this stuff done. I'm running the newer fuel injection coil, which runs on full 12 volts. So I just got done getting the resistor wire dug out of the harness underneath the dash. Let me show you that mess. Figure if that'll run on 12 volts, just as well do it, get a hotter spark that way. But for those of you that aren't aware, Ford did not use a ballast resistor like that was in a little module like Chrysler did. They used a wire, a calibrated wire. And it wasn't just a matter of finding it. This is the back side of the switch, which I somehow managed to break. But you know when you find it, like in my Mustang, I believe it was pink. And it feels different, where the other wires have a harder, stiffer insulation on them. This is a softer, I don't know quite how to describe it. Yeah, it's just softer. And you don't just find it hanging out in the open. What Ford did is they put it in the wiring harness and they run it back and forth and then taped it all in there. So if you want to take it out, which you don't have to take it out, you could just find it, cut it, and then splice into it. But I was already digging into this harness anyway because I was getting rid of the neutral safety switch. So I decided to just go ahead and cut it out. But anyway, let's see here. It is about, what is that, about 4 or 5 foot long. So yeah, I got that done, but man, I hate wiring. I hate it so much I'm not going to even try to film it while I'm doing it. But I'm going to go ahead and get some oil put in that engine and we'll prime it. I got some gauges put in here. I didn't show that either. That turned into quite an ordeal. But anyway, we'll get some oil in there. We'll prime the gauge and see how good oil pressure makes just spinning it with a drill. Anybody else digging that new Aussie song, Patient Number 9? Man, you just can't turn that thing up loud enough. It's not even possible to turn that thing loud enough. I've tried. Hey, here we go. I just watched the footage. It looks to me like it topped out at 52, which I'm frankly really impressed by, although I didn't really have an expectation as to what it was going to do. I guess if I had to guess, I would have said maybe 30. I'm sure it's not going to be that good when it's, warmed up and running, but honestly, I've had many small block Fords, 302s in particular, that they didn't seem to give a rat's ass if they had any oil pressure. Seems like a small block Ford runs just fine with very little oil pressure, in my experience anyway. But anyway, 52 pounds cold running off a drill motor. I'm pretty damn happy with that. Well, hopefully today's the day I get to fire up this little bitch. Got a few things left to do, make battery cables, run some rubber flexible lines on the transmission cooler, put the new ignition switch components in. I don't know how hard that's going to be, what I'm going to have to destroy to get those out. As you can see here, I'll show you. I never did show it, but this is the 2-barrel carburetor that I ran on the 78 F150 when we made our trip down to pick up that Comet down by Cape Girardeau and go to a swamp meet. It ran great on that 300, and this is basically the same cubic inches. I got a 2-barrel adapter on there. People might be wondering why I put a 4-barrel manifold on there and a 2-barrel carburetor, but that's all this thing's going to need. I'm not going to be out mud racing and whatnot with it. If I do want to put a 4-barrel on there, I can always do that later. If I do, I'll run a Autolite 4100. But anyway, I'm going to shut my yapper and get to work here. I do believe I'm ready. As usual, it took a lot longer than I thought. While I had all this wiring in a mess, I did find a black wire that I'm assuming was a ground that wasn't hooked up. So I've got it grounded to the dash there. So let's see if the smoke rolls when I hook up the positive cable. Okay, no sparks, that's good. Look at that, I even sprung for the fancy pants battery terminals. Turn the switch on, see what happens. Should have the fuel pump run. Yep, I'm hearing it. I did a couple days ago fill up the gas tank and there's no leaks. I don't see or smell any smoke. See if she cranks. Little problem there. Let me fix that. All right, let's try again. Got cranky. Okay. All right, maybe I'm not getting any spark. Okay, we got spark, just apparently not happening at the right time. All right, so I advanced the timing a little bit. Let's see what happens now. I can't let it run too long because there's no cooling system. But I do want to try to get more transmission fluid in it. I don't know if the camera's picking it up. There's that click, 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 click. Sounds like it's coming from the passenger side. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using this pry bar as kind of a makeshift stethoscope. I've done this before with mixed results. What you do is you put the pry bar up against something and then put your ear up against the pry bar. And it makes the sound vibrations travel through the pry bar into your ear. And in this particular case, I could not find anywhere where the noise was any louder. So I was hoping to use that technique to home in on, or try to home in on where the noise was coming from. For some odd reason, the camera phone is picking up that ticking noise and making it sound way louder than it really is when you're standing there in person. It's also not really picking up the sound of the exhaust as much as it is in person. But anyway, yeah, the tick is definitely there, and it is kind of worrisome. All right, real quick here. I know the engine's hot, and I probably shouldn't run anymore, but I'm going to fire it up just quick enough to see if I can determine if the transmission's working at all. It still needs more fluid. It's not showing anything on the dipstick. I've already got 8 quarts in there. Well, that's 9 quarts right there, and that's all I got. I think this engine, even though there's no coolant in it, the temperature gauge is starting to read. So I think I'm going to call this good for the day. Unhook the battery cable and see if I can go find some more Type F and get back to this tomorrow afternoon. Well, you know what, folks? This video is getting pretty long, so I'm just going to call it good. This was supposed to be about the engine. The engine clearly runs. It seems to run pretty good. Can't drive it yet, but it sounds good other than that ticking, which right now I'm going to assume it's a lifter ticking because this engine's been sitting for so long. Maybe it'll free itself up. Maybe it's something else. I can't believe that it's anything very serious with the good oil pressures this thing has, but maybe it is. Time will tell in the future once I get this thing going. Yeah, we'll just pick up with the transmission issue later. I'll have to go get some more fluid and whatnot, but until then, go out and find yourself a project and have fun with it. Well, hey folks, it's the next morning. I went and got some transmission fluid on the way to work last night, and I just felt like I needed closure on this transmission issue. I wanted to put some fluid in it and make sure it was going to work because I was worried about it. So let's show you what I have discovered. Okay, that's great. The transmission's working, but listen to this. That clicking noise is gone. So whatever it was going through that heat cycle must have freed it up. So I'm going to assume it was a lifter. But I need to get this thing shut off because it's getting hot again. I'm stoked. My transmission works and the engine's better. All right, so now you need to go out and find yourself a project and have fun with it. Later, fartwads.